why do we hear so less number of salespeople actually talking about it? While if it's so important, why aren't salespeople and sales teams and sales leadership not talking about it? So let me first go to Indra, and Indra, I'm sure you're working closely with a lot of clients. So what do you hear? How important is it, specifically for Indian clients?
Sure. Thanks, Vivek, and thanks, Raja, for being a wonderful backdrop to this. So whatever you shared actually tells us what is important for the business to address. So you mentioned about the scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, and that's very critical to kind of achieve a net zero status. But what we are seeing, as I work with different organizations across sectors, I'm seeing mixed reactions. Many of the sectors, they are taking it up very positively, and they are gung-ho about kind of doing something about it and achieving a net zero status by a certain amount of time. While others are very, very skeptical, and not for no reason. There are very, very valid reasons, and Raja mentioned that there are hardly any kind of controls on some of the specific areas. Like when you are stating a net zero target, you'll have to also address the scope 3 emissions part, which is beyond your control, which is beyond your boundary. Although many organizations, like some of the oil and gas companies, you might have seen in the public domain, they disclose only targets around, net zero targets around scope 1 and 2. But that's not the entirety. That's not in entirety actually, and it's recommended by the global scientific fraternity that you'll have to kind of address the scope 1, the scope 2, as well as the emissions that are getting generated across your value chain, which involves the scope 3 emissions as well. And that is where the challenge actually comes in. There are 15 categories of scope 3 emissions, which talks about the upstream emissions, downstream emissions, the employee commute, and the related products that actually feed into your manufacturing process as products. You have to get into the life cycle emissions of all these products as well. So that makes it a very big challenge for some organizations where the scope 3 is very, very widespread, or the supply chain particularly is very, very widespread, and it's very difficult to kind of monitor, map. And then once you have monitored and mapped, then how do you control them, and how do you kind of commit to reducing those emissions to achieve a net zero target? From the responses that we are getting from different companies, they are trying to address that, and people are trying to set up specific targets around net zero. And there are actually two kinds of targets people are setting. So there's something called a short-term target, and the other one is the long-term target, which is the net zero target. The net zero one is the long-term one. You might have seen in the media, many organizations are actually flashing targets around 2040, 2045, 2050. India has committed to 2070. But I have closely worked with maybe a set of 10 leaders, industry leaders, who formed the Committee for Climate Change and Sustainability Roadmap for the businesses in India. These were the top companies in India who formed a steering committee, and it was based out of CII, and I was fortunate to be part of these discussions that were happening. And the entire discussion was revolving around how the business can make a plan of achieving the net zero much earlier than 2070. So they were much ambitious, and they wanted to kind of come out with a roadmap which will take them to a net zero status much before 2070. That's what the pulse that we are seeing among the businesses.